Trick or treat! Grip can't be here. He's still trapped in Silent Hill. I think he's lost his head. Ah! Fortunately, I am no longer trapped in Silent Hill. I was able to find another seal or a doorway or something like that. Who cares? Point is, I'm back and we are ready to take a look at a fantastic film, which I think we all need after the last review, Trick or Treat. So without further ado, let's get to the lowdown. Trick or Treat was released on December 9th, 2007. It's rated R, clocks in at about 1 hour, 22 minutes. Was written and directed by Michael Dougherty, who you may remember from such films as Superman Returns, X-Men 2, and X-Men Apocalypse. If any of those make you nervous, they shouldn't, because this is actually a really well done film. All right, so the film stars, and there's a lot of people in this movie, so we're just going to touch on the high points here. Dylan Baker, who you would probably remember as Kirk Connors from the Sam Raimi Spider-Man trilogy. Anna Paquin, who was actually in X-Men, come to think of it, as well as True Blood, which is probably her biggest and most famous role. Brian Cox, the amazing Brian Cox, I should say, who we heaped acclaim on earlier this month when we did the review for The Autopsy of Jane Doe. And finally, we have Quinn Lord as Sam.
Happy Halloween.
Didn't you get one?
I don't want to spoil too much here. Trick or Treat is a very unique anthology film in that it does not present its storylines as separate short films, but rather as an ongoing interweaving narrative that takes us through the entire town and all of its residents at different points in time. Sometimes the stories overlap directly. Sometimes there are only mentions of what's going on. You may see a scene in one part of the story and then see it again from a different character's perspective. This gives you some wonderful insight into the complexity of the story and the relationships between all of the different characters who kind of weave in and out of each other's lives all evening long. So here's a quick look at some of the stories that are featured and some of the more interesting plot elements. We open up with kind of a prologue where we have Henry and Emma, a couple who are on their way back home from a Halloween party or a parade or something to that effect. And Henry is hoping to get a little bit of Halloween action, and Emma tells him to go put on the tape, which we come to find out, of course, is a porn. While he is up there waiting for her, she goes about the task of taking down all the Halloween decorations because she doesn't like Halloween. Surely that won't come back to bite her in the ass. We actually observe her blowing out a jack-o'-lantern before midnight, which is a big no-no if you're into Halloween traditions and things like that. You're supposed to keep them lit until after midnight. Somebody else sees her do this too. Somebody from across the street. And we'll leave it at that, but let's just say that the breaking of Halloween traditions is a thread that definitely ties all of these different people together tonight. Across the street from Emma and Henry, we have Steve Wilkins, the school principal. Steve is dealing with another tradition violation, which is a fat kid who's stealing way too much of his candy. You might recognize this kid whose name escapes me and I didn't look it up, I apologize, but he was in Bad Santa and Bad Santa 2. So if you've seen those movies, you know who this kid is. Steve decides to deal with this rule breaker, and as he's trying to take care of the fallout from that, his son Billy is constantly nagging him to help carve a jack-o'-lantern. Don't forget to help me with the eyes, he says over and over again. At the same time, Wilkins' grouchy neighbor comes outside to complain about the smell and wonders why he's digging a hole in his backyard. Wilkins tells him it's a sewer or septic tank problem or something like that, and the old man storms off, muttering under his breath and just basically being a dick. After Wilkins takes care of business and he heads back into the house, he happens to glance over to his grouchy neighbor's house and sees him in some kind of trouble on the inside, pounding on the window, calling for help, things like that. Wilkins basically tells him, tough, and goes in the house. Just hold that thought. We may come back to that. Another storyline that we follow involves a young, very beautiful girl named Lori, played by Anna Paquin, who is attending a Halloween party with her sister and their friends. She's kind of bashful about her costume. They're all dressed up as fairy tale characters, and Lori happens to be dressed up as Little Red Riding Hood. The costume is not as revealing as her friend's costume, so it's a little weird that she's concerned about it. Her sister and their friends offer to help find her a date for this party, but Lori insists that she'll be fine, she'll pick somebody up along the way, and they part ways there. Eventually, Lori does come across somebody that she takes to the party, Mr. Wilkins, dressed up as a vampire, going around causing mayhem and mischief. I won't get into the details of their interactions, but it's one of the highlights of the film for sure. We also follow 4 children dressed up and ready to go trick-or-treating, stopping by the house of a 5th child who they discuss as the girl Rhonda is coming out. They refer to her as a savant, or somebody who's incredibly smart but very, very socially inept. It's very obvious that she's socially inept. She has the big nerdy glasses that she pushes up her nose, and she talks kind of like Velma from Scooby-Doo. She's very much clearly not with the crowd of people that she would normally be running with. The 4 kids escort her to the rock quarry at the edge of town, where they relay the horrible and tragic story of a school bus driver who was paid a significant amount of money by the parents of the kids that he would drive back and forth to essentially lose the bus with all the kids on it. Now, these children were mentally handicapped. Some of them had physical aggression problems, things like that. When they show in the flashback, you can see them chained to the bus seat. So obviously these kids were very, very disturbed and in need of some kind of special care. And all of their parents were too exhausted to continue to try and take care of them. So they paid the bus driver to have him lose the bus, essentially. It doesn't go well. The kids end up taking over the bus and driving it right off the cliff. All of them drown in the lake at the base of the quarry, except for the bus driver, who manages to survive. After relaying this story to Rhonda, the other children kind of go off on their own, and eventually they all disappear, except for one that stays with Rhonda. You get the idea that he's kind of leading her through something, and you would be right. Probably not the greatest idea. Rhonda has some abilities that they didn't know about. It doesn't go well. Finally, if you remember Wilkins' neighbor, this is Krieg, and he is played by Brian Cox, and he has spent Halloween night scaring kids and taking all of their candy. Sam, the little boy from the beginning with the burlap sack over his head, sees this guy doing this and is not real thrilled about it. Eventually, it culminates in an actual physical struggle between little Sam and Big Krieg with his double-barrel shotgun. It looks like it's the end for Krieg, except for the fact that when Sam tries to stab him with a giant sharpened lollipop, he actually ends up stabbing into a candy bar. Halloween tradition is satisfied. He went to the guy's house, the guy gave him candy, now he's going to leave. We next see Krieg giving out candy with something of a smile on his bandaged and wounded face. However, one of the groups of children that comes around to trick-or-treat, let's just say Krieg recognizes them, and we'll just leave it at that. Trick or Treat is a gory, scary, imaginative romp, and in my opinion is easily one of the best Halloween-themed films since Mr. John Carpenter picked up a camera and introduced the world to Michael Myers. Each storyline is well executed, directed with finesse and style, and the interweaving narratives, the overlap of characters, the surprising revelations that come along with those Everything is extremely well put together and very tightly crafted. It makes you feel like you're part of something bigger when you see all of these stories and characters coming back up, later and throughout the film. It's very gratifying to see familiar faces that you've spent some time with, engaged in other activities or whatever. It's also a lot of fun to see how the stories interconnect and just makes the entire Halloween night seem like this big epic ordeal. It's very grand in scope. Taken individually, the stories seem to be pretty straightforward at first, but each one offers a twist or a surprise, something that subverts your expectations. Just when you think you know what's about to happen and you see what's coming, nope, they pull the rug out from under you and it's something completely different. In most cases, you're not going to see the twist coming. It's very effective like that. And it makes it even more satisfying. However, knowing the twists in advance doesn't really impact its rewatchability. I watch this film every year. I rarely have had a better time seeing the same movie over and over again. There's always something new, some little tidbit that I pick up that I missed before. Not a lot of films can do that for you, so this one definitely does that.
My, what big eyes you
So the verdict, is it worth it? I think it's pretty obvious. I can't recommend it enough. It perfectly captures the fun, mischief, and even the horror of Halloween night. The stories are absurd, of course, but that's the point. Halloween is a night of mischief and magic and mayhem, and sometimes murder. And these fun and frightening stories embody all of those things perfectly. If Trick or Treat isn't already on your Halloween viewing list, you really should consider giving it a shot. It's fantastic, it's a lot of fun, and it gets a very rare 5 full Grims on the Grimometer. That's it for this edition of 31 Nights, 31 Frights. Thanks for listening and watching. I hope you'll consider hitting that subscribe button and checking out all of the other shows we have to offer here at Grimm's Scary Tales.